August 3rd, 1968, 4 months earlier. As he sat on a beach in the Caribbean, a quiet engineer named George Low ran his fingers through the sand and wondered whether he should risk everything to win the space race and help save the world. At 41, Low was already a top manager and one of the most important people at NASA, in charge of making sure the Apollo spacecraft was flight-worthy. Apollo had a single goal, perhaps the greatest and most audacious ever conceived: to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy had committed the United States to achieving this goal by the end of the decade. Never had a more inspiring promise been made to the American people, or one that could be so easily verified. Now, Kennedy's end-of-decade deadline was in jeopardy. Design and engineering problems with the lunar module, the spidery landing craft that would move astronauts from their orbiting ship to the lunar surface and back again, threatened to stall the Apollo program and put Kennedy's deadline, just 16 months away, out of reach. And that led to another problem. Every day that Apollo languished, the Soviet Union moved closer to landing its own crew on the moon. And that mattered. The nation that landed the first men on the moon would score the ultimate victory in the years-long space race between the two superpowers, one from which the second-place finisher might never recover. For months, NASA's best minds had worked around the clock to fix the issues with the lunar module, but the temperamental and complex landing craft only fell further and further behind schedule. By summer, many at the space agency had abandoned hope of making a manned lunar landing by the end of the decade. And then, Low had an idea. It had come to him just a few weeks before he'd arrived at this beach, and it was wild, an epiphany, a dream. It was also dangerous, risky beyond anything NASA had ever attempted. But the more Low thought about it, the more he believed it could keep the Apollo program moving and save Kennedy's deadline, and maybe even beat the Soviets to the moon. Low inhaled the fresh, salty air and tried to push space travel out of his thoughts. At home, his mind burned non-stop with ideas, formulae, trajectories. Now he needed a break, and it should have been easy to find one in this tropical paradise. But the only reminder of America was the local newspaper, which told of the Newport Pop Festival in Costa Mesa, California, where more than 100,000 music fans were expected, and brought word of potential protests at the coming Democratic National Convention in Chicago. It had been an explosive year already, with assassinations, riots, and violence. A quiet beach was just where a man like Low needed to be. But Low could not relax. He walked the beach, looking out over the ocean toward Moscow and the moon, thinking, imagining, America and the world on fire behind him.